When I started training as a teenager, I used to believe a whole load of rubbish that the online fitness industry spouted. And by subscribing to a few seemingly harmless myths, my training and progress stagnated for way longer than it should have. But after 10 years of trial and error, I've identified the 4 biggest misconceptions about fitness that I used to believe which held back my progression. And by debunking them, I'm now fitter, stronger, and happier than I've been in a long time. So follow me on a day of training as I share these notorious myths that I finally managed to put to boot. So I've just finished my morning run, which is a relatively new habit in my life, because I used to subscribe to the idea that cardio kills your gains, which is the first myth I want to talk about. But this one's tricky, because I suppose there's an element of truth in it. Let me explain. Doing vast amounts of cardiovascular exercise in the form of running, swimming, cycling will likely harm the pursuit of maximising muscular hypertrophy. There's only limited amounts of volume that your body can recover from in one go, and splitting that volume across 2 different training disciplines is not ideal if your goal is to become world class in either of them. But the thing is, that's not what most people are training for. But when I started working out, I got all my information from a very select group of fitness influencers with unobtainable physiques and naturally high levels of testosterone. Allegedly. And it took me years of training, growing up, and frankly wrestling with a healthy dose of body dysmorphia before I came to realise that their advice had very little to do with actually becoming fitter and much more to do with buying their latest supplement. If I want to look like Chris Bumstead, then running 30 miles a week is definitely going to hamper my ability to build a natural amount of skeletal muscle and recover from his expert level training volumes in the gym. But I came to realise that that's not the only reason I'll never look like Chris Bumstead, because he's also got a moustache. No, I definitely could grow one if I wanted to. But he's a genetic freak whose full-time job for many years has been lifting weights, eating large amounts of food, and building muscle. And listen, I'm not trying to hate on Chris Bumstead. I think he's really entertaining and he's really transparent about what he does and how he gets there. The point is, I managed to stop viewing my entire relationship with training through the backdrop of a small number of genetic outliers with bizarre physiques and unenviable lifestyles. For the average person like me who enjoys lifting weights, throwing in a run or 2 a week is not going to kill my gains. So after years of exclusively weightlifting and frankly becoming quite unfit, I wanted to make a change and start feeling my age, rather than simply feeling the constant chafing between my pointlessly large thighs. I've continued to enjoy my lifting and have been making steady strength gains in the gym, all whilst now training for a marathon and now running upwards of 30 miles a week. And I've intentionally been able to maintain my current body weight and hold on to decent amounts of muscle. And I've only had to make a few simple changes to my program to limit the effects that the cardiovascular training has on the weightlifting. I split up my hardest running and lifting workouts across a week of training and make sure I eat enough food to account for the extra energy expenditure. I'm not exactly Mr. Olympia, but I'm happy with where I'm at and I'm excited at where I'm going. And I think more people need to ask themselves this question when it comes to their training. What is your long-term goal? And I'll come back to how you answer that. But first I need to make some lunch. Right, it's lunchtime now, and that brings me on to my second myth, which is that you need to ruthlessly count your macros or calories if you're someone that trains regularly. And again, I guess this comes from accepting niche advice from people online that isn't appropriate for the average person who works out because they enjoy it or to stay fit. And because of this advice, when I was younger I became obsessed with my protein intake because I was told it was essential for building muscle or getting a six-pack. And that first bit at least is true, but that doesn't mean that I need to be drinking 2 protein shakes, eating half a chicken and a fillet each of salmon and steak per day. Sure, if you're a 250-pound bodybuilder with 6% body fat, you need to be eating more protein than I do. But as with lots of things in life, your protein intake can be understood by the law of diminishing returns. The average adult only needs about 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight each day, and if you're someone that trains or lifts weights regularly, then you probably want to be aiming for more like 1.5 grams per kilogram. And that'll pretty much cover all bases, but there are a lot of people online that advocate eating a lot more than that, and it's possible that those people are going to be able to squeeze an extra % or 2 of muscle growth out. But for anyone like me, fortunate enough to be living in one of the wealthy regions of the world, like Western Europe or North America, you're far more likely to be deficient in things like micronutrients and fibre than you are in protein. And regarding counting calories, well, I made a whole other video on why I don't do that. If it works for you, that's great, but personally it doesn't fit my lifestyle. I've always thought that having strict targets for my macros or calories just confuses my relationship with food. I'm not an elite athlete striving to extract every last ounce of performance. I just want to live a healthy life and eat foods that support that. So, when it comes to my diet, I've simplified my approach hugely. Instead of focusing on macros and calories, I focus on portion sizes and eating whole foods. And I eat a wide variety of plants each week to boost my intake of micronutrients, without the need for any influencer supplements. Eating this way naturally gives me a healthy balance of protein, fibre, fats and carbs. But I leave space to indulge, knowing that training is only one part of my life. And this isn't as prescriptive as eating a single scheduled cheat meal each week. I just try and focus on eating predominantly plant-based and whole foods 80% of the time, and recognise that 20% of the time, that won't be realistic nor desirable. This 80-20 balance means my diet is far more sustainable because I don't have an all or nothing approach where one slip up equals failure and my motivation is slashed. Again, I'm not getting anywhere near the Olympia stage with this diet, but it should at least support my training and longevity and stave off a lot of the chronic diseases associated with a poor lifestyle. Right, time to eat. So with it being one of my double training days, I've just got to the gym to do a squat and bench press workout, and that leads me on to my next fitness myth, which is the idea that there's some secret trick to building strength or fitness. So from my own experience, I remember I used to have a real genuine fear as a teenager that I couldn't build my legs. I'd spend hours searching for YouTube videos on this topic, and I'd be faced with bro science graduates insisting that I should be doing drop sets, supersets, and training to failure every single session. So that's exactly what I did, and later when I came to running, I applied the same logic, and every time I go for a run, it'd be a 10 out of 10 effort. I thought that this might be the trick to muscle growth, and my legs' reluctance to grow was more a reflection that I wasn't working hard enough. But this way of training relied on a mindset where you needed to constantly be working at or near failure without getting burned out, and a body that could tolerate this consistent intensity without getting injured. Maybe it was my teenage ignorance and my propensity for clickbait, but it took me years on YouTube to find the knowledgeable experts that demystified the process of building strength and muscle. I eventually learned that the only secret to making progress is to consistently increase your training volume over time and leave space for recovery. And much later, when I came back to running as a hybrid athlete, I followed this same principle of progressive overload. And I finally started to understand that this increase in volume was measured over a period of months, and that each session didn't necessarily have to be harder than the last. My plateauing progress wasn't because I wasn't working hard enough in the gym or doing enough drop sets or supersets. It's because I wasn't able to stick to the principles of progressive overload on a consistent basis because I was constantly overworking or training to failure, both in the gym and with my running. When I eventually cut the junk from my leg days, started exclusively back squatting twice a week and gradually increasing my volume over time, my strength blew up, my legs started growing, and my inner thighs became increasingly reliant on daily Vaseline applications because of all the newfound chafing. Nowadays, I plan my training out a few months at a time. My aim is that by the end of each training block, I'll be running slightly further or faster and lifting slightly heavier than I was at the start. And as a hybrid athlete, of course there's a compromise when it comes to balancing these two training volumes, but my ability to increase my running and lifting volumes simultaneously over time still exists. It's just going to be slightly slower than if I was only training a single discipline. But there are a whole load of positives too, like all the money that I'm saving on Vaseline. So I'm back home now, showered and fed, and it's time to talk about my final fitness myth, which is the idea that you need to have specific goals in order to keep training in the long term. And although this myth is perhaps the most abstract one so far, it's also potentially the most important, so bear with me on this one. I see family and friends take up training as a means to an end, in order to achieve a short-term goal. It might be trying to lose weight in preparation for a holiday, or get fit enough to run a 10k, and these provide great motivation in the short term. But all too many times I've seen that whether or not people achieve that goal, once the target's been and gone, they revert back to their former less active self. And I've been there myself. Before this last 12 months since I've started hybrid training, I tried running before. 1 year in high school I ran all through the summer holidays in preparation for a cross-country event, and once it passed, I stopped running. And several years later during COVID, my in-laws and I decided to run an informal family half marathon, and I trained hard for it for several months, ran the half, and then once again I stopped. I mean, it's not like I didn't enjoy the running, because I really did. I guess I just ran out of steam once that one thing I pinned all my motivation on had been and gone. So what's the answer then? Because I'm not for 1 second saying that you shouldn't have goals. I mean, right now I'm training for a marathon, whilst also simultaneously trying to get back to a 230 kilogram deadlift. And both of those things for sure are providing me with short-term motivation. But I now know that when I run that marathon or match that deadlift PR, I'm not just going to stop. And that's all because of a shift in my mindset. I love James Clear's take on this in his book Atomic Habits. He says it's far more useful to focus on building good systems and habits rather than goals. Achieving a goal is great, but that only causes a momentary change or a temporary result. And if you don't hit that goal, well then that's also going to be pretty demoralising. And as I've gotten older, my goalposts have shifted. I've got a new focus on longevity and sustainability in my training. I'm 27 and technically in my physical prime, although it might not feel like it. So if my only motivation to keep working out is to keep improving onwards and upwards and smashing goal after goal, well that's not realistic, because over the timescale of the rest of my life, the trend of my physical performance is inevitably going to be a downward one. So to keep working out on a consistent basis, I need to look at the bigger picture. I want long-term success in my training, where I keep doing a combination of aerobic and resistance work well into my later years to support me living a happy and healthy life. And when you look on that timescale, of course it makes sense that I can't just schedule a marathon or a high-reps competition every year until I die and expect that to be enough to keep me exercising. The purpose of setting goals is to win the game, but the purpose of building systems is to keep playing the game. And if you want to hear how I built these systems and made running and lifting unbreakable habits, well this next video might be for you. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.